intro. I don't know if it's going to be the podcast or not.
Are you recording?
Yes, I am. Okay, hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Amanda Ray, and whenever I was 17, almost 18 years old, I left the polygamous cult that I was born in. If you're interested in hearing more about that, I will leave the links to those videos in my description box down below. That's if I put this on YouTube. I don't know how I'm going to do my podcast intros, but maybe we'll just be like, hey, welcome to the podcast. I don't know if it's going to be Culty Crew Podcast or whatever at this point because it's one of the first episodes, but today I am your host, Amanda Ray, and we have a special guest, Jessica, here. She is, if you remember her from the show, she is I don't know, a lot of people said you were the main girl. So, do you remember that?
Yeah, I don't even know how that conclusion was drawn, but...
But it was. I think it was because in the main photo shoots, you were always in the middle.
I felt like it was because I was always the oldest, and I felt like I was a big sister in the crew.
Yeah.
Kind of with all of us, I just kind of felt like I was in a big sister role.
Oh, definitely. I did feel like I just felt safer with you guys because I was the baby. Mm-hmm. Of the five of us, Jessica, Andrea, Chanel, Colleen, me, I was the youngest because I was 18 when I first was on the show. Did you know that? I was 18 when I met you.
Parentified you were, too?
I know. Parentified? What does that mean?
Just like grown up, like, I don't know.
Well, I was like getting married.
Yeah.
I was like doing all these adult things that I thought I was so ready for, which in hindsight I wasn't, obviously.
Well, I would have, like, I imagined at that time, like, looked at you more like a peer, too.
Really?
Like, in age as well, to realize, oh, you were 18? I mean,
yeah.
I guess I was 23, so it must have been whatever time of year.
I just remember looking up to you so much when we were filming because I was like, how is she so emotionally stable, and how can I get to that point of being emotionally stable like her? Because I remember getting so upset. I still notice this with our relationship. I will like say things that bother me about certain things, and you, not that you're unbothered, but you can like compartmentalize it better to where it doesn't affect you emotionally.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But I've looked at other people like that too. Like, how are they okay? And then that's also where it comes to that, like taking advice from people where I'm like, if I don't even want their life, why does their opinion matter?
Right. Never take advice from someone that you don't even like what their life looks like. I mean, unless they have like a lot of life experience in one area, I guess. I don't know. And that's the area you're trying to get advice on. But I did want to ask, because we were on a few escapes together, was there one escape that was like the most triggering for you, like bringing up the most trauma? And then was there one that was the easiest for you, and why?
The most triggering for me was actually Melanie's.
Oh, I was going to guess that one, because that one was the most physical, like, violence. She was literally held down when she tried to leave.
Yeah, it was the most triggering because of the information that we had at the time, too. Because, like, we're getting fed the information in real time, and we're getting that, you know, her escape wasn't actually scheduled until Sunday during church. And I don't know if this was, I don't remember if this was Friday night or Thursday night, but it was, like, a couple days beforehand. And so we met her, we had a couple things happen already, and then I'm at home. We already filmed a little bit, like meeting her, getting to know her story, and then I'm at home, and then get the call that Dillon figured out she's trying to leave. We need to go now. Mm-hmm. And so then try to figure that out, and it's happening in real time. We get to where, you know, the crew, the camera, everybody's kind of coming together, how they do last minute like that, and it's just kind of a scramble, and then getting that feedback. They're at the house holding her down, and unclear to us if Dillon's holding her down or who's there, what's happening, and then just getting major flashbacks to what my life at that time looked like. And then also, it was also kind of...
It's easier to get triggered too because I guess I forgot she's your half-sister, so that's the same dad too. Mm-hmm. It's like bringing up so much trauma because it's different when it's a different family, but this was like your family.
Yes, and so it was like I could very visually imagine what she was going through, and that I remember having those like physical fights and altercations with Dillon and having hope and knowing that when I knew somebody was coming in to save me, that it was like I just have to get to that point until they get there. Mm-hmm. And kind of feeling that feeling of like she's counting on us to show up, and we're sitting here waiting for camera crew, we're sitting here waiting for everybody, and it was like I think that was building up all this triggering for me. And then also her older sister was one of my best friends in the order, and obviously my half-sister. And so that realization of like I might be coming face to face with her, and then in conflict of the fact that we're on two opposite sides now, and we haven't seen each other in a long time, and we never got closure. You know, it just ends.
Yeah.
So it was like a lot of that And then when I get to the house, it's like, because her boyfriend was involved, and it was like, hey, has she texted you yet? Because that's how we were getting the updates as to what was going on like at the house, was through him getting the text. And it's like, no, I haven't had an updated text. And it's like, okay. So we're like at the house, and it's all dark, and I was like, does she know we're coming? Does she know, like, what? And then you hear her scream. And as soon as I heard her scream, something just kicked in, and I just ran around the other side of the house. And they didn't show this, but I actually stuck my hand inside and unlocked the house from that door.
So
the ducky door.
And like technically they could say, oh, you broke in, but you heard her screaming.
I heard her screaming, and it was like immediate. Like I didn't even think about anything at that point except for get to her and let them see me, and let whatever they're doing to her be directed at me so she can get out and be
so they
safe.
can be mad at you instead of like whatever they're doing to her.
And I'm not under their spell. I'll figure it out later. Just get her safe, you know. So like ran in there, and I remember just immediately opening the door and being like, oh, hello, like, and then just following the screams, and then like running past people.
Did they just let you go past them?
No, they were so shocked I was there. They were like, Stephanie! And I was like, hi! I'm like just like running and dodging past people, all her siblings, and then got down to the stairs where she was at. And yes, they were trying, at that point, had just shoved her back in the room and like closed the door. And then we like, at that, I think Chanel was right behind me. I don't know how far she was behind me because I was the first one to get there, and was just like yelling to her like, we are here to get you out, and like, what do you need? And kind of letting everybody just kind of taking that, like, you could feel it, like the tension and everything that was directed at her was turning towards me, and just kind of feeling there like vulnerable, that feeling of being naked and alone and like whatever. And then at one point Chanel was there, so she wasn't there right there the whole time, but at some point she was there.
And so security, is there a reason why security didn't go in? Were they afraid, or were they not there?
I don't even know if they were there, because again, how fast it was going down, because we all met at a place near the house to try to hurry and get people together, to gather the camera crew together. And while we're there waiting for people to show up, the boyfriend's getting real-time texts of what's happening at Melanie's house. And then it was like, hey, everyone's here, let's go. And then we just beelined it to the house. And as soon as I got to the house, I ran up to the door. And I don't know if it was from my own triggers, and it was hard because I know like Melanie didn't know me that well, but like it was one of those things where I reached out to people who were out of the order, who I wasn't that connected to, but they were still family, and I relied a lot on them to be the strong person to get me through times like that. And so it was like, here's my time, my turn to be that person for her. And you notice, like, you've probably noticed this too, like, however those scenarios go can be really pivotal in whether somebody gets out or doesn't get out. However those scenarios go, you just never know, because sometimes some of the people will go back based on how something went, because they take signs and everything. You know, they're like, oh, the Lord was giving me a sign that I needed to stay, and that's why it took so long, and that's why you never could get to me. And
Oh yeah, when there's ever, I've had this happen multiple times where so for instance, recently I had this friend who was from the order, who was my friend when I was in the order, reach out and want to hang out with me. The first 3 times we tried to hang out, something came up, and usually in normal life you would say, oh, that's normal. That happens all the time. But to her, she was like, I really felt like it was God showing me that I should not be meeting up with you. And I really felt like something bad was going to happen when we met. And she was like so traumatized, like thinking someone was going to catch them or something was going to happen. Like God was so upset with her. And I was like, you realize what you're doing to yourself, right, is what they've trained you to do. It's like at this point, they're not even shaming you. You're shaming yourself because they've drilled it into you so much that now you're doing it to yourself.
And that's how that control works, that it's there when they're not even there. They're physically not there, but they're controlling her behavior.
Exactly.
And that's why it's hard to explain that domestic violence, that cult control, that like abuse control, and everyone's like, why don't they just leave?
Yeah.
Because
well, exactly what we were just talking about is it's like it's not even, it follows you when you leave. I'm sure you had that. Like I remember thinking like the bad things that were happening to me was because I was a bad person, right? Because I gave up on a lot of things. I stopped praying, or I stopped doing the things that I was taught to do, facing north, whatever. But with your thing with Melanie, were you nervous then for her to go back? Was she that type of brainwashed where you were scared that she was going to run back?
The problem is I didn't know her enough to know that, because I had met her that day or the day prior. Like within the last 24 hours is when I met her to even plan her escape, and it all was unfolding on camera. And so I didn't I didn't know her enough to know where she was at with her mind, and I was being very gentle with her because, of course, we had all the time, you know, so there was no pressure to have all those conversations right in the first time we met, because we were going to be meeting and figuring things out for Sunday. But I do remember, like, telling her to jump out her window and to just get out her window and, like, Melanie, just get out of this house. Let's let things calm down. And,
yeah, how
and then
did
we'll
it
come
calm
back.
down? Did she jump out of her window?
No, I looked up and they were boarded. She was
Oh, my
literally
God.
locked in her room. And so I was like, what? There's boards? Like, there was boards, like, nailed all up on her windows. And I don't know why they were there, but in the moment I felt like, oh my gosh, you really are trapped in this room. There really is no way out but through the door and all this, like, all the people that I just went through to get down here. And now they're all here. And there was this big, like, mosh pit going back and forth. Me and Chanel was, like, hugging Melanie, trying to, like, protect her. And the family's, like, pulling her, like, no, you will not take her away from us. You're not taking her to hell. And, like, the weirdest stuff that you're just like, oh my gosh, this is really happening. But, like, I wasn't processing it all until there became a point where things kind of calmed down. Melanie got out of the shuffle. They directed it towards me and Chanel. Melanie was in the room, not being touched. And me and Chanel was kind of being shoved at and kind of, I don't know, it was like this weird, like, there's so many people in a small space. Nobody was actually shaking us, but, like, we were physically being shoved around.
Weird.
Like, you know when you're at a concert, nobody's actually shaking you. That's how I would explain
like
it.
a mosh pit type of situation.
And then it just came to a point where I was like, okay, she's safe. Police are on their way. I need to get myself safe so that I can be there for her again. So I was like, I'm going to excuse myself and walk outside and take a deep breath.
Who called the police?
They did. I heard them on the phone. And I was like, okay, police are on their way. We're good. And I know when they get here, I'll have a conversation with them. Things will make sense. And I went outside, and then all of a sudden it hit me. Oh my gosh, I just broke into that house. And I'm a mom. And I can't jeopardize going to jail for this tonight. And I'm involved in a domestic dispute. And what the heck? And, like, it just hit me. And then that just, everything hit me. And I just started just sobbing. And I just stood there like I couldn't even think. And I called Andrea to be like, did I just break the law? And then Chanel came out. And she's like, she too. We just both just lost it. And just, like, stood in the street holding each other until the police came. And then we were just, like, walked to go and try to talk to them.
And the police understood, right? Because they didn't arrest you guys.
No, they didn't arrest us. And also because it's on camera, like, everything, I mean, for the most part, I don't know where the camera people were because I wasn't like, hey, do you have us? Are we in shot? Like, we just beelined.
But you were mic'd, right? You had mics on?
Everything was mic'd. It was chaos. And then the way they were calling my name, too, like, it really was putting me back in that headspace. Because
they were calling you Stephanie? And you hadn't been
and
called
the way they call my name, it just always, like, it's so berating and condescending and, like, I am disgusting. And that's how I started to feel.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you feel like you have a lot of that attachment to your old name, and that's why you don't like going by Stephanie?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I feel like that's also probably maybe why I can compartmentalize things a little bit, because I'm like, those problems belong to her.
Yeah, I think, and that's what I was saying, is like you seem to compartmentalize so much, but I think that that's a good point. You put it all on Stephanie, and you're not Stephanie when you don't want to be Stephanie.
Yeah, I stepped into a new identity. I have a new mom. I have another mom, I guess, and then a whole family. And just kind of moved into that.
When you ever talk about your story, do you ever feel like you're telling Stephanie's story and not Jessica's story? Like you're not like, you can distance yourself emotionally.
Sometimes I'm more emotionally connected, and sometimes I'm less emotionally connected. But I did, on purpose, intensively go through therapy when I was in a safe place to, on purpose, feel the emotions and emotionally connect to my story so that I could heal through it. Mm-hmm. And then through the journey of finding my authentic self, of not who's just like the person who was always surviving or people pleasing or being what others wanted of me, but who am I? Yeah. And like letting that journey shine through. But I didn't do that till I was married. It was like right before we started filming, actually.
Wow.
And like through EMDR and everything that I was like, so I mean, I went and addressed it, but yes, in the moment, at a 17-year-old girl who was meeting this new family, then as soon as my mom gave me my name, I immediately was just like, that goes there, and all of this is in the new. And tomorrow is a brand new page in a brand new journal in a brand new book, and it's my new life. And I get to write it.
Wow.
and kind of just took that approach.
Because I always wondered why the new name, but I kind of totally understand it now.
Really? It was out of respect for my mom. Just like when I chose my family, I met a couple different families, chose my family, called her to let her know that I chose them. And then in the conversation, it just naturally came up, just like, what is it going to look like with me moving in, making the moving in plans, me becoming one of their children, being the oldest daughter, and how the other oldest daughter had already felt about it. And then just in those conversations of like making those plans, then I just said, like, would you like to name me like your own child? And she was like, oh, well, I like the name Stephanie, but if you'd like a new name, I can give you a new one. I said, yeah, I think a new name would be good for me, actually.
Oh, so it was more your idea, but then she picked the name.
She was like, yeah, right then in that moment, she said, how about Jessica? She said, what if you don't like the name? And I said, then I'll tell you, but I also don't really care.
Yeah.
And then she said, how about Jessica? Since Jessica was my investigator on my case who introduced me to my family.
Oh, wow.
So she said, what about Jessica, since she was such a pivotal role in us finding you? And I said, sounds good to me. And then finished that conversation, hung up the phone, looked at Andrea and said, my name's Jessica now. My mom just named me.
Wow.
And it was just that.
Was that hard for Andrea to get used to calling you a different name?
No, literally in that moment, from then on, I was Jessica. To myself, to her, to everybody.
Wow.
It was like, I don't know how that happened. It just...
Because even sometimes Cammie has a hard time. She's like, who's Jessica? Oh, you mean Stephanie? I'm like, no, I mean Jessica.
Yeah, like it was just like, that's my name. And then I can even look back at my journal, like my, what are those called? Scrapbooks? Pictures. And I can see a physical appearance change in 3 months apart from the time I was in this foster home to the time the new pictures I took with my new family with the name Jessica. Mm-hmm. And I can see like almost like a light in these pictures and just like
it's completely different.
Yeah. But I was already out for 2 years. I was already in foster care for 2 years with these pictures still. These weren't older pictures, you know. But I think taking on a new name really allowed me to not be forced and faced to work through trauma right away that I wasn't ready to face and work through. And to not have that internal, like, gross, disgusting, I'm bad. Every time I heard my name, I would just, like, this thought process of, like, what did I do wrong? Who noticed me and how did I displease them?
Yeah.
You know?
That does make sense. Okay, so we just talked about the hardest experience on the show.
Right.
What was the easiest escape and why? Because
Marianne was my favorite.
That was mine too.
Marianne was my favorite. That I do have things I wish I would have done. I wish I would have spoke to her mom more and felt more confident to talk to her mom, especially mother to mother, in that, like, I was still newer as a mother. But now I'm like, I wish my now self would have been present for that, because just kind of, holding her accountable as a mother. You can't just disown your kid because you don't like their choices. Like, what kind of mother is that, you know? But on top of that, like, it's like they talk about this Satan's plan and then they literally do it.
Exactly.
And you're like, you told me this was Satan's plan.
It's a force, exactly. And then they go and force, and then they, for some reason, they're doing it in God's way, even though they teach that force is Satan's plan.
Right.
It's like, don't teach that then, if you're going to do that.
And that hypocrisy is like, I think for me, when I would see that hypocrisy, that's what helped me break down the order teachings and break down what was like manipulation and mind games and like control versus like what was just being a decent person and what was like their just belief system, and kind of just break some of it down. And I think when people can get permission to think for themselves and break that down themselves and not be told how to think, that it will naturally like grow within them.
I think too why Marianne's was a lot easier for me is because it wasn't the order. Because it doesn't trigger, yes, it triggers you, but it's not the same trigger, because in the order escapes, we know the names of all of these people. We have history with all of these people. The abuse is very similar, whereas in the FLDS, yes, they have a lot of similarities, but their prophet is Warren. Their prophet is, it's completely different. And so it was easy to detach from it. And then also I became really good friends with Marianne. Like, I got a really good friendship out of that escape.
I feel like I identified with her a lot in a lot of ways. And what I even saw in her is like, she was real, she was raw. She was very trusting and willing to be present with us too when we were strangers.
Yeah, she really was. And it almost felt like when I watch our first time meeting, I look back and I'm like, that doesn't look like our first time meeting, because we were it was almost like an instant connection with her. And I think that's why I've been able to keep this friendship. I just saw her last time I was in Utah, and like, I just feel like we've said this multiple times, like, we're sisters that never, like, that lived the same life but never met.
Yes, I feel like that through the show I met a lot of, like, other polyg sisters, I guess.
Polyg sisters. Are you still in touch with any of them?
Not as much as I want to be.
Yeah. I mean, being a mom and having 3 kids, too, is, like,
yeah,
it's hard to be in touch with anyone.
The other one I was really close to, I think I struggle talking about it because she's passed away since, but...
Oh, Yolanda's sister?
Yeah, and so, like, I didn't know she passed away until long after, and so, like, internally, like, that's been something hard for me to deal with and process, but I feel like, I don't know, I'm still dissecting those emotions, because I'm like, is it coming from a place where I didn't get a chance to, like, say goodbye, or that she passed away and I didn't know what happened until it was, like, long after? Is it, I don't know why I feel, like, distressed about it, but she was one where I met her, and immediately I felt like I met my Warren Jeffs FLDS soul sister. Like, we were just 2 redheads, 2 big sisters, 2 people who just, you know, like, there was just such a connection that I just felt like from the beginning. And then her little sister Yolanda has this blonde head, and my little sister Andrea has this blonde head. You know, like, it just felt like so many mirrored things in our lives. Yeah. And then
I did feel like I only met her once, but she did have a similar feel to you, whereas she was very calm in a lot of situations that I wouldn't be.
She just felt like
that's how you were.
She was just pretty great, and she loved her siblings. That was what I think too, like that drive that you love your siblings, that will just put you in. Because she really wasn't calm. She was, like, terrified on the inside. We would have these conversations and these pep talks, and it was like the thing that would drive you through those uncomfortable experiences was the love for your siblings.
Yeah, but she came off as very calm. But I guess she may have been, like, hiding a lot inside. But
you just do that for your siblings. I'm sure your sister does it too.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, Cammie was the one that would, like, stand up for me when no one else would, and to my dad too. And I feel like I never saw Cammie, like, stand up so strong for herself to dad, but when it was me or her siblings, she would fight, like, to the death. But it's weird how you're not willing to do that for yourself, but your siblings, you will not let someone disrespect them. But you will let them disrespect you. Like, why is that?
That's a conversation that my adopted mom had with me, like, before we filmed. That kind of helped through that pivotal time for me, where she was like, Jessica, I just want to sit down with you. And she's like, I don't understand why you let these people walk all over you, because I wasn't finding safe relationships, safe friendships, safe dating partners. It was like I was spiraling. I was repeating, like, order patterns. I would find people who would take advantage of me. And I was, like, major struggling with that. And then I would allow people to push past my boundaries. And I was struggling with that. And then my mom put it in perspective of, like, you are allowing yourself to date somebody that you would never allow your sister to date. You are allowing yourself to have friendships, and friends treat you a certain way. And she would point out, like, my adopted sisters, who I obviously just met, but I loved them enough that it was like, wow, I wouldn't let these people I just met tolerate and put up with this. Why am I doing this to myself? And it kind of put it in perspective. And then from there, I started using that as, like, my measuring to be like, would I allow, like, my sister, or how would I feel if my sister was going through this, and what support would I give her? Let me learn how to give that support to myself. Let me learn how to become my own best friend, and let me learn how to be that person for myself that I never was.
Yeah, that's a good perspective to put it in and be like, would I be happy if my sister was dating this guy, or why am I okay with being this disrespect towards me, but if I would never tolerate that for someone I cared about.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's an order thing, where we just kind of were treated so bad that because I'm trying to think, is it a mixture of the red flags look so pretty because they're familiar, or mixed with we just don't know how to respect ourselves?
I did not know how to say no. I knew when I wanted to say no, but I didn't know how to say no. I genuinely, and, like, to give an exact example, like, it was like I couldn't go from, like, hey, we're hugging, it moved to kissing, it moved to, like, at what point do I say, okay, that's enough? And, like, as soon as it went to a certain point, it was like, I assumed in my head, now I've committed to it all, you know, and it was like,
and you
I struggled with where do I back it off, or where do I say, oh, I'm done, I'm starting to feel uncomfortable by this? Even in a friendship, you know, when you get that peer pressure.
Yeah. You feel like you have to follow that crowd almost. It's so weird, but I
there
feel
was
like
no boundaries in the order.
Yeah.
They slapped you, they inappropriately touched you sexually, they emotionally berated you, they humiliated you.
Yeah, the problem with that was, even though all of this stuff was happening, that stuff can happen to people out in the world too, and everywhere. But the biggest problem is when that's happening and you have nowhere to turn to. You have no one, no safe place. So
and
then
every time I messed up out in the real world, it was a very different experience to come back and have a safe place and a support system than being in the order.
Yeah.
And being blamed or victim blamed or shamed.
Because, if that's the case, where, like, the order mindset, then the cycle is going to repeat forever. Whereas if you have a safe space, I think we were talking about this in one of our episodes, how you were saying people in the order were bullies, and we lived in this environment where we're all in this survival mode where we wouldn't be doing those things if we had a safe place to be able to process, right? But because we don't have a safe space to actually self-reflect, we don't have time to do that, we're just viciously in this cycle forever.
Well, in Dillon's family too, I don't know if it was like this in others' family, but Dillon would actually put peg his children against each other. And he would set us up to, like, tell on each other. Kind of like, you know, when somebody gets arrested and it's like, oh, if you give away a bigger crime,
then your sentence is less. Yeah.
The same thing happened in the order. It was like, if you could we'd hold on to each other's secrets to be like, when, you know, other people, if they got in trouble and they hurry and just threw you under the bus, somehow they're saving themselves in the moment. But it got people to start gathering secrets about each other.
That's what the first wife's family did.
The what?
The first wife in our family, they would do that. And our family never, I feel like, did that. But their family would, like, hang on to as many secrets, try to get secrets out of you, so that when they were in trouble, they'd be like, Manna's doing this, Manna has a secret phone.
Yes.
And then it would, for some reason, help them. I guess it would deflect off of what they were doing and be like, Manna's a bad person.
Because then it would be like it's a survival thing. It was like, get the consequence off me, look at them
Put it
now.
on someone else.
Yeah. And I just remember being like, it's so betraying and it's so trust violating over and over and over again that, like, how is somebody really supposed to build a healthy relationship after going through that their whole life, and it's the only experience they have in a relationship?
Right. That's also a good point. I'm glad we're talking about this, because I wondered so much why it's so hard for order people to trust us. You know how they're so, like, timid to trust us? I think that's a big part of it.
Why are we gathering their stories? That was the other thing too, is like, when people did share, there's a lot of people who've shared a lot of things that I've respected their privacy 100%, and if they chose to stay, that's their choice.
But so we did ask the best escape, the worst escape, and then I also did want to, because we were talking last night about how the preparation for marriage class story. So you were saying how you were in a room with Daniel, and he had, like, all of his kids, and this was a preparation for marriage class. How often were those happening?
Did your family do family meetings on, like, Sundays?
Every first Sunday of the month we would all the wives would get together at one house, and we would have family home meeting.
Okay, so yes, we had, like, different things like that, but I don't know, I can't recall if there was, like, a rhyme or reason to when it was. They had moms meeting, they had Dion's older kids meeting, Dion just his boys meeting. We had, we had different meetings, and clearly there's not enough Sundays in the month to do all of that. But he started having his preparation for marriage classes separate from the order's preparation for marriage, and just, like, talking about, we were all together, boys and girls, and then he would separate us because there was different things the girls needed to know and different things the boys needed to know when it came to marriage, apparently, and their roles in the marriage. And these were led by Daniel and then led by his married sons. And every now and then I think Paul came and sometimes spoke to us at them.
Yeah. Do you remember what the roles for a woman were? Like, what were the roles for a bride, I guess? Or a housewife or whatever?
The concept of, like, that I understood it all was, like we always say, please, 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 never say no. Saying no to your husband is like saying no to the Lord.
Because that's the chain of command, the law of one above another. You always have to tie into the chain of command. If you're questioning, then you're questioning God, because ultimately that chain of command goes back to God, right?
Yes, and then that, like, expectations of having dinner on the table, keeping a clean house. And it was so funny because all the expectations, I would just sit there and think of my house. I would think of all the houses that I go to of Daniel's wives, and I would just think, Yeah, none of these people are meeting all these expectations.
I remember thinking that too. Like they would.
So you expect me to be better than them?
Exactly. And they would say in a lot of our classes, they would say you not only have to be a good, like, happy wife living polygamy, but you can't be jealous. And I would look around and be like, everyone in this room is jealous of the other wives. There's jealousy everywhere.
They would also be like, preparing you to accept who you were going to marry. And they would do it in different ways of, like, planting seeds. Like, there's a time where Dillon said, some of my sons will marry some of my daughters. And we're all just like, okay, please don't be me. But, like, the seed has now been planted. And so now it's in someone's head to try to figure out, who's it going to be? Who has the Lord chosen to punish so severely?
Yeah, and it can be anyone in this room. It can be even my own sibling. Like, no one is off limits almost in a weird way.
And then how are you supposed to have normal relationships, normal healthy touch? How am I supposed to, like, sit next to my brother on the couch and just be like, yeah, whatever, and not have my parent be perceiving, like, that we're having sexual relations or that we're trying to grow something that's,
Did they do that ever? Like, accuse you if you wanted to be friends? Really?
They're like, boys and girls cannot be in the same room together. People would get in trouble for that. People got accused for that. It was just, like, constant. I felt like I grew up in a very highly sexualized environment, which is interesting to say because it was such a religious. Yeah. How does something so strictly religious have such a high sexual connotation to it?
I've always thought that it was so weird that the most religious places, the most religious, like the worst pedophiles are found in this masked religion. Usually, you'll find them kind of covering it. I don't know. I don't understand the correlation. Maybe it is that skewed perception of a woman is property still, kind of, and that's what religions still kind of do. Not saying all of them do that, but definitely some of the people that I've met, even now this year, I've met people that have this skewed perception on a woman's role and a man's role in a relationship, and they're always very religious.
Yes.
So I don't know if they're getting it from the Bible, maybe? Like the Old Testament?
Dude, all the women I look up to in the Bible are the most independent, most, like, think for themselves. Like, I feel like their religion, it's hard and it sucks, but it does breed these type of people, because all it takes, I mean, I get that it's not the intent of religion, but it's that when you have somebody who has an underlying mental health issue or trauma or of some sort, and then you give them this religious, like, God complex of, like, you're a man, and then that just kind of festers and builds, and in their own mind they create it, because it's like people with mental health issues and psychosis and delusions and paranoia, like, you could try to challenge that for them, but all you're going to do is validate it. So I feel like religion kind of allows those things to grow, because religion's like, we're persecuted, well, then paranoia grows, we're this, you know, and it's just like, it just creates a petri dish for these type of people to get far in life before they're caught in crime behavior.
Yeah. It's a weird, because I don't want to say, like, all religions do this, but I do notice more often than not, especially this, it's like the stricter the religion, the more stuff that's getting brushed under the rug, the more they care about their image, more than who they actually are, in a weird way. I don't know.
Like, I'm like, if you make a mistake, own it. If you, like, let your whole image be, like, your whole raw image, accept your whole self, not just, like, part of you. And I think that's sometimes, too, even where that internal conflict comes of, like, and which sounds like I'm conflicting myself, right? Because I just said that when I first left that I separated my past from my present to my future. But there was a time in my healing journey where I did have to come back and accept myself as a whole, accept that Jessica and Stephanie and the past and the present and the time where I made mistakes and the time where I had to accept all of it as a whole.
Because that's ultimately what built
to heal. Yeah, and I had to be okay with my true, raw, authentic self, even if by society's standards or by somebody else's standards, it was like, I'm too hot-headed, or I'm too, you know, strong, or whatever. I'm using positive words. Too stubborn. Yeah, I use positive words because I've got daughters, and so I've tried to change some of those. But, like, manipulative, other words that women will get, like, put over their head because they're just trying to survive in this world and got to figure out how to get get their needs met.
But it's also like it's true. You don't have to take the defining words that they're saying and put that on yourself as well, because it is a perception. It's really other people's perception of yourself. We were talking about this the other day too, where a lot of people's like negativity towards you is just projection, and it's their own insecurities usually.
And at the end of the day, you really just need to be okay with yourself.
Right.
And if there's some things that you're like, I'm having internal conflict with, or I need to process, or I need to go like dissect. And there's things that I haven't dissected in my life that I'm like, okay, you know what? It's not emergent for me to move forward. Put it on a shelf and just keep going on. And when I've got time, or when it is emergent or pressing, I'll bring it back down and I'll deal with it.
I did want to bring this up because we were talking about this. There was so much stuff that we were talking about off camera that I was like, I wish we were filming this, because it's good information that I feel like I've just now recently learned. And I have this story of Andrea that I want to bring up after this. But the whole concept of like, now you have had to self-reflect so much, because you had to unbrainwash yourself to realize what it is that you do want right now. So you have this sense of, you know, yourself and a lot more. And I've been out long enough so I can say this. I've been out for 8 years. I don't know many people, even in their 20s, that have a very good perception of themselves, or even like know how they are being perceived by the world. Like, they have a different perspective of themselves than the world sees them. And I was like that too when I very first left. And it's kind of weird to think that when you come from a cult, as long as you go to therapy and you work on yourself, but when you come from a cult, you kind of start to, I just noticed even with myself, I'm so fascinated by like getting to the root problem of everything. I think because the brainwashing. Because you don't want, for me, I was like, I don't know if this is me or if this is because I was brainwashed in a cult. Like, these actions, are these defining me, or is it because I have this thing in the back of my head that's like God or whatever?
Yes, I still have those things come up. Even still, when I think like, oh, I know myself, or I've kind of gotten all figured out, and I can recognize what part of me was created, or what part of me happened because I was abused, or because I was surviving, or because of the scenario and situation I was in. And then I meet my daughter. Very strong-headed, very strong-willed, every now and then emotionally dysregulates and has an anger outburst that I'm like, oh, maybe some of that was actually age-appropriate. Maybe some of that really was me. And even still, let's excuse, like not say, like, I anger outbursts because my parents were abusive. I anger outbursts because I was a child struggling to regulate my emotions. I still look at that as like, oh, well, what an opportunity for me to learn how to show love and help her learn how to self-regulate, rather than shame, punish, and abuse, and do all the physical like consequences that I received. And I still even look at my daughter and like, I just can't even imagine doing that. That's getting off topic again to what we're saying, but like,
no, but it is true though. It's like, I remember thinking those thoughts too. Like, I could never have a daughter. I don't even have a daughter, but I could never have a daughter and just flip a switch and never talk to her again because she just, or abuse her just because she's not doing exactly what I think. Because what you were saying, and I like how you bring this up a lot, kids don't usually have malicious intent, but in the order, that's what we were all taught, is everyone around us has malicious intent if they're hurting you.
That's how I felt too growing up, is I felt like I was misunderstood all the time. I felt like people always assumed that the worst out of me. And then sometimes there was a reputation that I had too, that I was just like, whatever, I could care less.
I was like that too.
What people think
my
of me.
mom would get so mad at me because my response was always, I don't care.
Yeah,
I don't care.
Genuinely didn't care, because it was like, I don't have the energy to care anymore about this stuff.
And it's like, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't anyway, so you might as well have no emotions on how they feel about you.
And in a way too, it's like, oh, that sucks. And at the same time, I've also gone through the part of where I'm like, well, thank heavens it was the way it was, because I got out. And had it not been like that, would I have gotten out? I don't know, because I didn't live that future.
Exactly.
I lived this one. And so I'm just like, Like, I've come to terms and come to acceptance with a lot of it, but there are still things that do come up, and it still comes up, the fact that, like, whenever my kids turn ages where something pivotal happened in my life, I notice these, like, anxious feelings inside of me become present, and I have to recognize I don't want to put my own trauma and project it onto my kids and shape their life and their childhood because of it. Even like just right now, like my kids are asking about like sleepovers, and I notice inside of me this like I can't breathe, and I like have to like I don't want to scare them. I want them to have a normal, safe, healthy childhood. But how do I help them do that? And so then sometimes I'm like, I need to figure this out. Something's come up for me. I need to figure some things out. And I try to be open with them about that. And they do know and recognize that I came from something interesting and weird. And they'll say it. They'll be like, I don't know. My mom's got issues.
And that was something I did have that I wanted to ask is how did you gradually start bringing up that you came from the order, or did they know, like, because they know that you don't have your biological mom in your life, like, how do you describe where you came from in an age appropriate way, you know?
We've actually talked about it in different ways a couple different times, and prior to doing the show, then there wasn't this when the show came out, that's when I really had to tell them, because I wasn't going to have my kids finding out by seeing it on TV or having my kids finding out from other people talking about it to me in front of them. And so that's when I really kind of sat down and told them the story. But prior to that, it was just, you know, I'm adopted, and my little sister was adopted too. So it's like, I'm adopted, and so-and-so's adopted, your aunt so-and-so's adopted, and then it was like other people in their lives were adopted. So like just explaining to them adoption, and then I would just be like, yeah, my home wasn't safe, and that's why I was adopted, and just that's what I would say. But when we started doing the show, my second daughter was 2, so she was really little.
Yeah,
she was between 1 and 2, because when we were started doing the show and was doing like the pilot, I was still nursing her and had to take a break to nurse her, and so they were still really young. But I do specifically remember when the show was airing and having a conversation with them late at night, getting ready for another season to come out that was a little bit more into my life and my past, or the next episodes or something that I was preparing for. And I started telling them the story about everything, and just like through my life, and just being in foster care and whatnot. Then there was a time where my second daughter, she was like, did you ever find a family? It was like the cutest thing ever. I was like, yes, Grandma Michelle, this whole life, all of this is my, that's the end of this story.
She probably was realizing finally what actually happened, and was like, wow, you did lose your family. And she has a family, so she's like, if I lost my family.
Yeah, and then she was like, oh, I love her even more. Her grandma, that's that so connection. Cute. And it's like, they have had some connection to my birth mom in some way, because I struggle with that. Like, I grew up, I mean, I love her, and I still love her, and I get that she's not the same person that I left.
Because she was a lot younger when she had you, right?
Yes.
So it was probably...
I felt like I grew up with her, felt like I had a big sister in a way.
Because she was, what, like 15 when she married Daniel?
15 when she married, 16, 17 when she had me, and it just, that, like, reality that, like, wow, I remember my mom when she was 20, or like I'm currently older than my mom when me and Andrea left through the court system, like our final leaving, and that reality of like, whoa, what was life like for her in that to lose her children at such a young age. Like, that was a few years ago for me that I was that age, and thinking, wow, no wonder she wasn't behaving in a way, and like things where I was like, choose me over religion, choose me over Daniel, you know, just thinking that I was somehow gonna be good enough, or that her children would be good enough.
Yeah, I had that moment, and honestly that realization didn't happen until recently. I told my mom, I was like, ultimately you chose your husband over your kids, and I have to just accept that. And she doesn't want to accept that. She doesn't see it as that, but that ultimately is the truth, because at the end of the day, she chose to tell us we're not allowed to come to the house, tell us we're not allowed to, you know, she doesn't do that to our dad. And like, I always wondered when that whole foster thing was happening with you, if your mom ever took any accountability for anything, or if she was just like, oh, poor us, the state's trying to hurt us.
A little bit. She did. At times, and it was unclear to me if it was through therapy that she was doing it, out of trying to show that she was doing what the judge had ordered her to do through therapy, or if it was her truly feeling that way. That wasn't clear to me, but in the end, like, I loved her so much that I thought I needed her love, but then what I realized is I just needed her to know that I loved her, and that was good enough. And then from there, my need for love, my need for fulfillment was coming from other routes at this point. And so I don't know.
I'm still, I guess, having a hard time myself accepting that, I guess right now I'm going through this phase where I'm like, I don't like that. Like, I'm mad at my mom. Mm-hmm. And I don't know when that's going to be gone or how to, like, speed up the process of not being so angry with her for essentially protecting my dad when she shouldn't have and throwing us under the bus when she shouldn't have, you know?
Right. I actually found a letter that I wrote to my mom. I obviously never sent it. But saying you should have been accountable for the adult that you are in this scenario, in this situation, and a lot was put on me, and you should have been the one to take care of your children. And also that recognizing, again, differentiating when I saw her as a victim, a child bride, and like a victim in her circumstances versus that, like, I'm now holding you accountable moving forward and going forward in life. Obviously, I've never sent this letter because I recently found it, and I know I wrote it before I got adopted as a way of, like, kind of just processing some of those emotions that were present.
Yeah.
Of, like, if I'm going to be moving forward into this new family and accepting into, like, allowing this other mom to come into my life and be a mother role, I need to really process some of these emotions so that I'm even open to this new relationship, you know?
I understand that, and maybe that helped you to process it faster, because I feel like my processing with my relationship with my mom has been such a long road, and in the beginning, I myself...
Well, she's whiplashed you guys.
Yeah.
You've gone back and forth with her. You've gone and had, like, this, like, hope that she was leaving. I remember what that hope was like with...
I knew in my heart that my mom and siblings were going to leave one day. Like, I couldn't sleep at night if I didn't believe that. So I literally believed every day, like, was a step closer to her leaving. And so when she went back to the order and brought the kids back and didn't even tell me, she, like, did it in secret, I felt so betrayed and so, like, lied to, and, like, it's like dangling this prize in front of you and you never get to touch it, you know, or it gets ripped,
and then she probably gets mad at you, and she's like, well, that's exactly what we did to Dad or whatever, and, like, why are you upset? The difference is you're the child. Your dad is a grown-ass man.
Yeah.
He can take care of his own emotions. He can deal with it. If he's abusive, then he needs to take accountability. You were the child in all of that. And that's what's hard about being, like, for me, where I'm like, wait a second. Like, your mom, if you're going to have all these kids, I feel like take responsibility in protecting them.
Yeah,
and
you shouldn't just have kids.
You guys are telling somebody, you know, the kids, we're telling our moms, we are being harmed. We are, you know,
we're being abused. We're having
abused.
other, like, I had times where I would say things, but I almost felt like my mom just wasn't listening, or, like, didn't value what I was saying. My mom, though, was the type of person where if there was a fight at school and I was involved with it, not that I was ever, like, a big in this, but the few times that things like this had happened, it was always my fault. Like, what did my daughter do? Amanda, come here. Let's fix you. You're the problem. You made me realize, too, just now, so I've excused my mom for her behavior for a lot of years, and I think that that's the thing is, for you differentiated, okay, I recognize that my mom was a victim at one point, and was, like my mom, too. My mom was 17 when they started coercing her. Well, she was younger than that, but 17 when she finally was like, okay, fine, I guess I do believe that I'm going to die if I don't marry him, blah, blah, blah. So I excused that, but I guess I'm having a hard time, because for a long time, I was just like, oh, my mom's a victim, like, poor her, like, we need to excuse her behavior. But when is the line, you know, where is the line to finally be like, you need to be held accountable for it? It no longer is just your life that you're affecting all of your 10 kids now.
And it makes it even harder too now when I see more people leaving, like the person that we were talking about earlier today with her child, to be like, wow, look at that person, and that person fought to get out.
Right.
Like,
and you think of too, like,
and then it hurts even more, because then you're like, was I not enough, Mom? Like, what made it? Did you really think I deserved all this? Or, like, but then at the same time, you just struggle, because you're like, oh, well, I saw you get abused too, or I saw you go through what you went through. You were stuck, you know.
There was a very different normal when we was in the order, and I wanted to bring up Andrea's story to kind of do the perception of, like, what was normal to us in our brains was so different than what's normal to us now, because now it's like, oh, in a heartbeat, I would leave a man for my child. In a heartbeat, I would leave any situation if it meant that it would protect my child. But then it's like, our normal out here isn't survival mode. Our brain works differently now. But I kind of wanted to bring up that example, though, of like what we couldn't sometimes differentiate that our normal was weird. Like she was telling me the story about Andrea.
When we first left the order together, and we weren't even in foster care yet. We were actually at my aunt's home. It was, I think, even in the first week, maybe 2 weeks. It was so barely brand new. And we were still kind of changing that mindset. And some of it for me had already changed because I was a little bit older and been exposed to the outside world a little bit more. And I also had more years in grade school where I was in public school, where Andrea had less because the order school was established at that point. And so we're out and about and we're in school, and I'm in a different school than her, so I left my school to go pick her up and just walk to her, and then we walk home to my aunt's home, and I pick her up, and she's just like this like feeling or look about her where you could tell she was frustrated or something was on her mind. So we start talking about it, and she was like, "Can you believe this girl?" And I was like, "What happened?" And she's like, she just like yelled at me. And it all started because Andrea was hitting on the girl's boyfriend and just kind of like, well, he's cute, and hitting on him throughout the day and just kind of like encouraging and being flirtatious. You know, her little 12-year-old self coming out of a cult that's very flirtatious and teaching her about marriage and teaching her to, you know, just be available for the man who has direction on her, right? Well, then she's just like, and then this girl starts yelling at me like I can leave her boyfriend alone. And she's like, I just couldn't believe her. And so then Andrea says that she's like, and I just told her, well, you better get used to it because you're going to have to share him someday. Andrea, that's not how it works.
But she must have thought the whole world thinks like that. Polygamy is the whole world because that was her whole world at one point. And I had moments like that too, where I was telling her how the band yellow card, I thought it was so clever because in the order we have this system, this banking system where there's a blue card if you have more money, there's a green card if you have less money, and then the yellow card is like the middle class. So I always thought that's so clever that yellow card named their band the middle class, basically. Like, oh, that's so cool. And then I was explaining it to someone and they're like, no, you realize that yellow card is only a order thing. I was like, really?
Yes.
I felt so dumb. And it was after I had left too. And then I've also had experiences where like my adopted sister, at the time she wasn't my adopted sister, but she would come over to the house, but only when my dad was gone because he didn't like when outsiders would come over. And my mom would allow me to have kind of a friendship with this outsider because my mom wasn't born in the order. My mom didn't like that we didn't get to have friends. So I got to bring my friend over when my dad was gone. She would sleep over, and every time she would ask, like, why isn't your dad here? That's kind of weird. And I knew that the polygamy wasn't normal, so I knew that I had to lie about that, but I didn't know that the other stuff was not normal, so I told her, and I wasn't lying. I was telling her the truth, but in a weird way. I was like, my dad is actually at my aunt's house helping her give birth. And I thought that was a totally logical answer because I thought that everyone in the world kind of just helped each other give birth. And she was like, went to her mom and told her mom that, and then her mom started to be like, I think that she's in a polygamous situation.
I'm sensing something's off here.
Exactly. But that's what I'm saying. Like, our normal was so different there. So we did do things that don't make sense now.
I can't even remember all the things that I had to like dissect or undo.
Yeah. Well, also
because it's so long ago.
Oh yeah, and like, because I didn't know that was abnormal. She told me years later how weird it was. Yeah. So I'm sure I came off as the biggest weirdo in public school.
But you probably thought you were like, I am killing it. I'm hiding my polygamy. I'm doing so good.
But no, I found out years later that so my adopted sister, her name's Tessa. She was at this party and their polygamy got brought up. And she was like, yeah, I actually am friends with a polygamist. And they were like, is it Amanda? Like, and I was shocked that everyone knew it was me, but I guess it was because...
How did you know?
Yeah, exactly. I thought I was so good at hiding that because that's what they taught me to hide our religion, right? But apparently it shined right through me.
Yeah, you think you're hiding it, but like, I also feel like there's a part of me that didn't want to hide it because I also wanted to be like, let me know what's not okay so I can grow, you know, like, yeah, I don't know. I was always driven by knowledge and always looked at knowledge as power. Oh yeah. And I always wanted to know more about the world and would be so inquisitive and ask so many questions, and they would try to tell me like, you need to stop asking questions, you're confusing your Sunday school teachers, and Dillon would tell me that, and I was just like, why do they not have the answers? Yeah. They're the teachers.
They should have the answers. Just don't question. That's what they would tell me all the time. Don't question because it's like questioning God. And I'm like, how are we supposed to get the answers then?
Right.
We're just supposed to never know the answers and just have faith. They were so big on this faith thing, and that how can you have faith if you know everything? You just have to, and it was like an excuse to blindly follow.
Yes, and it's interesting now because I notice I really promote my kids now questioning everything, even if I don't have the answer. And I can just say that to them. I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
I can tell you a couple different theories. I can tell you what some people think. I can tell you what some scientists say. I can tell you what religious people say. I can tell you, you know, but me personally, I don't know. But this is kind of the way I'm going with it. This is what feels good, or this is what feels right. And I'm kind of moving forward with that.
Yeah.
On different things, because, it's all different. But I don't know.
Did they ask questions about, like, what happens when we die and, like, stuff like that?
Yeah.
They do?
And I'm like, I honestly don't know. Well, so with my second daughter, then the one who was like, did you ever find a family? Later, after that story, like years later, it must have stuck with her in some way, because then she was like, what happens to me when you become a bad mom and I need a new family? Where do I go? And it's like, wait, what? You've been thinking about this all this time?
It, yeah.
That's not going to happen. You are the most important thing to me. I will never choose a man over you. If dad becomes abusive, if so-and-so becomes abusive, or all these people that are trusted people in their life, if they become unsafe, we are 100%, we are hightailing it out of here, and we're going to do what's best for you. Because that's my job to you as your mother.
This just died, but I have the rest of my questions on here. We took a little intermission. Sorry, I'm trying to have the microphone right here.
What's up, Mike?
Okay, it's recording now. I kind of had just, because I had a lot of people asking, like, what you did after the show was over. I don't feel like you did anything different. I feel like you had the same life, but I think people think that, like, all of a sudden you just stopped helping people and it stopped being all about, helping members leave, blah, blah, blah. But I think at the end of the day, you still were doing all of the same stuff.
Yeah, so, before the show came on and after the show, like, no matter what, it's like, if somebody needs help, I'm going to be there. If there's anything I can do, I'm going to be there. It's a lot different when you have a network financially supporting you, being able to just last minute get on a flight and get somewhere. It's also a lot different when you have a camera that's protecting you against the he said, she said situation.
And security guards and so and that's the thing is we definitely were helping with escapes more per year, because we also had like finding someone from the FLDS, and we had this phone number that people could call, whereas when the show was over we couldn't really that wasn't being funded anymore, it wasn't happening anymore. So really the ones that I had helped had to reach out to me through my Instagram. I had to figure out how I can meet up with them in secret without a production. So I did help like just this last year I helped a few members leave, but it was way different than having the show.
And some of it too was like before the show came out, then leaving it didn't look like us necessarily going in and getting their stuff. That was a unique situation because we had the ability to do that. It looked like grab your grocery sack and run. Take what you can in your hands and run and leave all your things behind, and that's that. And that's what it looked like. The fact that we could help people get some of those things, because that was something that was really hard to leave behind. Really hard to leave behind all those pictures, your identity,
your memories,
everything you built up, and the fact that so much that you worked so hard for and you gave up so much time for working for their businesses and your childhood, then to just leave it all behind and have to start over and work that hard again.
Yeah.
In a whole new world that you don't know as well, it's like that it was like, hey, maybe this can make the trauma and the transition less traumatic if people can bring some of their stuff and bring a little bit of their world and kind of feel like they're not setting up with their grocery sack in hand,
Yeah. What I've noticed too, so there definitely is an evolution of escapes now. Like back in the day when there was no social media, then it was way more scary. And we've also, we can touch a little bit on this. I would love to do a whole episode on this, but like back in the day, we've heard stories. There's no evidence, but we've heard stories of when there's rebellious members, there was all of a sudden, like they would be working in the mine, there was all of a sudden an accident that would kill them. And so because there's no there was at the time when it was earlier, there's no now we have the story about how Daniel went to jail and how David went to jail. There's all these things that are lining up, and they're afraid of the media, whereas back then they were able to get away with so much more. Now I'm seeing the evolution of the escapes is social media. Now we have these platforms. Now we have this place where they can share their story. So it's almost like they're yes, there's the members are still getting bullied that have left. The most recent ones have been very bullied,
Yes.
but
they have even feared for their lives too.
Yeah, but they're more afraid. I feel like it's getting less and less because the order is getting more afraid of what we're going to do and what we're going to expose on the internet.
And the biggest thing is if we can stand as a united front here on the outside and help people feel empowered and like let them leave. If they don't want to be there, let them leave. And please don't disown your family, but please stop trying to brainwash them and just let them be.
Yeah.
Just love them because they're your family. And hopefully we can move into that in the future. That's always been ultimately my goal. Of like, hopefully people can just figure out how to, like the real world, when someone says, hey, I don't want to be in this Christian religion, or I don't want to be in this, whatever religion, I want to be LGBTQ or whatever, and the family's just like, okay, cool, well, we'll see you on Sunday, just let it be like that. Why you gotta be so oppressive about it? And like,
so weird,
oh well, there goes your soul, like, well, like all
and
these things.
It's sad that probably every viewer understands that, because it's not just the order that does that to their kids. It's
lots of families do it.
Religions, even people who aren't religious, have this expectation that their kids should be a certain way, and if they're not, then they're failing or something. And I think that that's the biggest issue. Is everyone's like, Amanda, why do you want to shut down the order? I don't want to shut down the order. If the order could be a positive place, and I didn't keep hearing these stories over and over and over where people are being abused and it's getting brushed under the rug, or being forced into a marriage that they don't want to be in. Like, if I wasn't hearing this anymore, I wouldn't feel so passionately to try to protect, because I have sisters there.
Right.
I have family there.
Well, and people in the order, take accountability for your actions and stop taking it in your own hands and your own consequences. If you break the law, you take the consequences just like the rest of the world, and you go to jail like the rest of the world.
Stop putting yourself above the law.
Hold the leaders accountable. And if you could do that, then guess what? The rest of us will just go on and live our life in peace. Yeah. But the problem is when you were given the chance to do that, when polygamy was decriminalized and that chance was there, and you were supposed to be coming out of the shadows and all the things that you said you were going to do, and you put your broadcasted women, your wives saying it's all so wonderful out there to say that this was going to make things all different and better. It didn't. It was just the same. You just like evolutionized around wherever things are at. It just continue to how do we keep people in the order? Well, why do you got to figure out so hard how to keep people in to the place that is the Lord's place? Because the Lord himself, if he's control over all this, he himself would impress this upon their hearts, and he would figure it out.
Exactly.
Why are you working so hard to do that?
I was wondering the same thing when I was in the order. I was like, why is it that we have to fight so hard to leave if this is supposed to be the Lord's place? Wouldn't we all fight so hard to be here? Like, it seems like everyone's fighting just to get to the next day.
And if it was really like the Lord's place, like, why are you so scared that someone's going to leave if they talk to me?
Exactly.
Genuinely, I have had to face this conflict within myself. Like, am I okay with, like, I try to be a true, honest social worker to the core. So I accept all people, right, as part of being a social worker, and fight for all people and against all oppression. Well, then, where does that stand with polygamy? Where does that stand with, LGBTQ? Where does that stand with oppression, minority groups, all different things, and advocating for even polyamory that's like kind of becoming a thing now, And a realization of like, it really just comes down to, are you forcing somebody else to do something? Are you shaming them? Are you, just let them be? And there's no LGBTQ, and the reason I bring that up, because they always, how they say more love is love, and they try to say, compare themselves and get on the skirt tails of LGBT.
Sorry, this is for any viewers who doesn't know what we're talking about, what the order likes to bring up is, why can two men get married or why can two women get married? Why can they get legally married, but I can't marry all my wives that I love so much? And I literally never understood why they kept saying that example, because I was always like, but there's still two people. It's still two tax returns, And
if you love your wife so much, then why were you pursuing someone else?
Exactly.
How did that even happen?
If you're so happy, why are you still looking for another one and another one and another one? And that's the thing too, is even when those laws were coming. Sorry, this is kind of off topic, but I just want to say my piece on this. They're not going to legally marry them anyways, because they don't want to claim the responsibilities and child support, and they want to get those free write-offs. So I was like, why are they fighting so hard to legalize polygamy or decriminalize it when they're never going to legally marry them anyways?
Right.
I didn't understand that.
Why? And then that realization too for me, where I'm like, okay, what is the difference? Oh, the difference is there is no same-sex couple out there who's creating this religion to be like, raising my kids, and my kids better be also same-sex, because if they don't, and they don't marry into a same-sex relationship, they're gonna go to hell, and the Lord's not gonna love them, and da-da-da-da-da. Like, that's not happening. That's why it's different. And I'm like, oh, okay, so then I guess I'm just against religious polygamy. And then I'm like, oh.
Because I've heard people be like, well, there's some people happy living polygamy. And I'm always like, show me one polygamous relationship that doesn't have anything to do with religion.
Yeah, and that's happy longer than 5 years.
Yeah.
You know, like, and even still, I feel like that's precedent.
But I would be happy for a relationship that I would see where the guy and the girls are all happy, but there's also this thing that I just feel like not mentally healthy for a woman to think I have to be so loyal to this man who is not doing the same to me. That in itself feels like mental or emotional abuse. Like, why does he get to have more say in what he does than I get to have in my life?
Wasn't it crazy when they talked about how, like, it was such an honor to serve your husband?
It was so deep brainwashing.
Like, well, so is he honored to serve me as well? Like,
no.
I just always, like, find the conflicts. Like, so if he's so special, then I must be real special too.
Yeah, that's what I never understood, and I didn't understand how I could see. I remember Paul doing this talk that was saying how you will get the satisfaction because his satisfaction is your satisfaction. Like, that's your reward, basically.
Hold up, let's back up and say that again. Wait, Paul?
Yeah, so Paul had a meeting.
Every time he's having satisfaction, he thinks his wife is experiencing his satisfaction.
That's what the meeting was about. It was saying that if you follow all of these rules of being a good wife to your husband, you will be so satisfied because you'll get to see his satisfaction. That's your reward. And so I remember looking around and being like, how is
I would be disgusted by my husband's
satisfaction. I know. I would be resenting him like, oh, you would.
I just can't even process it. Right? Just like,
exactly.
What?
But like, because the paper, and I did a whole video on this because it bothered me so bad, but the paper that they were going off of was a 1950s paper of how to be a good wife. It was a real paper that people back in the day were living by, but they were teaching it in 2013. They were teaching it to us young women. And I remember being a teenager being like, is anyone listening to this bullshit? But there were women in the crowds being like, and I was like shocked.
Yeah, I struggled because I hate to throw that LDS church under the bus, but like sitting in LDS church too, trying to like explore, trying to just, what about this, you know? And having some of that come up, I was just like, okay, yep, I feel it.
Yep, and it's kind of. Well, it's because I think that was like a Joseph Smith thing too. Obviously, if your whole basis is polygamy, and they're gonna try to see how we were saying, how can we keep members in as much as possible? How can we keep women in this relationship? Yeah. You know, so let's kind of not tear them down in a way to where they think that they're so lucky to be with this person they'll never find anyone else. Which 9 times out of 10, you guys, when I'm helping a woman leave or she's thinking about leaving, I just go to the meeting with this woman. If she's married, I go knowing she's not going to leave. Because they are so torn down, and they really, I've had so many meetings with women who are married, looking at their options and coming and seeing me in secret, and every time it's like they really believe that their husband is the best that they will ever get. And then they're sitting there telling me this disgusting stories about this husband, and it's like, you really think that it wouldn't be better just to be single? Like, you really think that you're better off being with this toxic person? And even my mom is an example too. Like, she would be like, well, because she had the choice of marrying my dad or Michelle's dad, Jesse. And she's like, well, you could have ended up being a daughter of Jesse. And it's like, you could have just been single, you know, like it's not like there was those two options in the whole world.
Right. But
to her, I guess it was. But
then if she ultimately chose, how did she decide that it was the Lord's decision?
Exactly. Well, her whole story is such a long story, but the long story short is that the same tactics they used to get her back in the order, they told her that like they had dreams that my little sister was going to die, and it scared her so much that it was going to be on her, and that they were all having like spiritual deaths because she was bringing them out, and like now they couldn't go to heaven because of her. So they did all of that tactic, and then I think the dreams of the deaths was the biggest thing that made her want to go back because of guilt. But that was the reason that they got her to marry my dad too. They said that there was this dream where they kept getting this date, like February 10th or something, to where if she didn't marry my dad by then, she was going to die. They like convinced her that. So weird. She was 17.
human trafficking.
It
you
is.
know what I mean?
It's not
just
like it. It is.
Yes, oh my gosh. Actually, yeah, that was something. I mean, I know we're switching topics again, but that was something where going through my education and going through schooling, the first time I learned about human trafficking, I was like, something is so familiar about this. And then the second time I learned about it, I was like, yes, this is what we do. And then I learned about it again, and now I look at it and I'm like, okay, we sex traffic and we labor traffic. And 100% in the order.
Someone was telling me that when I can't remember if it was in college or something, but it was like years after I had left, because I had never thought that the order was trafficking. I never thought it was to that extent until explaining it to people and having, I think it might have been one of the producers that was like, it's like trafficking. And then I thought about it and I was like, no, it's not
it's
trafficking.
that security guy that we had who does Homeland Security.
Was it?
I think so.
Oh yeah, I think you're right. But anyways, the whole thing was like, I kept trying to say, no, it wasn't as bad as it was, and then I looked at it and I was like, what's the definition of trafficking? Paul was trading his daughters. It was obvious he was trading his daughters and then getting other daughters back. And there was a certain family that would get a bunch of, like, all the pawn shops in the order. They had a lot of money, and you would notice all those daughters were marrying Paul's sons, the first wife's sons even.
By coercion, fraud, you are promised something for sexual acts. You're promised eternal salvation for your sex.
And that is trafficking. And when I realized that, I was like, wow, I guess it was way worse than because my brain, I'm constantly catching my brain telling me it's not as bad so that I can cope with it.
Because when you realize how bad it is, it's really hard, I feel like, to enjoy your serenity, your peace, your life out here without having that heavy survival's guilt that makes it hard for you to move forward when you know what you've left everyone you love in.
Right.
And it makes it hard. So then you have to kind of like I say, shelf it, or your brain has to like minimize it as like a coping tactic.
Even Allison was saying when she tells her story, she says it almost as if it's a different person. Like she disconnects from that person that went through that. Like it's not her anymore. Kind of like the Stephanie Jessica thing.
Yeah. And then one day when you feel like you're ready to kind of bring it all and accept your whole self, then, I mean, I remember going through that and being like, I do think that going through so much in your life has, like for me at least, it's made me appreciate all the little things and all the parts of myself too.
Are
you like, have you come to a place where you feel like you're really okay with who you are now?
Oh yeah. But the sucky thing is that took me, I literally didn't get to that point till last year.
Yeah.
It took me like almost 8 years to finally be like, wow, I really like this person. Like before it was like, I would tell my therapist, I want to be more like this. I want to be more like that. How come I can't be like this? How come I can't be like, what's wrong with me? How come I have this idea that I want to be and I'm never going to be here? It's like I'm stuck in this point. But now I think it was just a lot of therapy, a lot of diary entries, a lot of like self-reflecting and being like, I actually really like that I was able to do this and pull myself out of there. And like, because of everything in my life, yes, a lot of things were shit when I was younger, but I was able to get to the place I am now, regardless of all of that stuff, you know?
And it's a crazy, you can't explain it to everybody or any, I mean,
sometimes I can't even explain it to myself.
Yes, and that feeling of like peace and like, I don't know, it's just that healing journey, I guess. And it's so worth it. And it's like,
and not everyone
I want everyone to have this, and I don't know how to give it to you. You just have to do the work and you have to show up. And that's the other thing too, is it's your own work. It's not your therapist's work, it's your work. Your therapist is there as a tool and as a support and as accountability and help you move forward on the path, but it's your own work. The therapist isn't trying to manipulate you. They're not trying to direct your life. It's you are directing your life, and you are taking control. And you will progress, dissecting everything.
Exactly. You will progress as fast as you can get through all of that part of it. And for me, it was like, it got harder before it got better. Yes, my life started to seem like, it was like spiraling, and I didn't know who I was, and I was so scared of myself because I didn't know who Amanda was anymore. And then after I finally dissected, like you're saying, like you pick apart every single part of yourself, and then you rebuild it, and you're like, okay, this feels amazing. Like I know who I am now. You have to get to that super raw, vulnerable place of like, just like unraveling everything and then kind of put it back together. Be like, okay, here's all of me. Where's my core? Very vulnerable. And now I'm going to come back together. And it's just like, I wish, a lot of people ask like, how do you do it? How do you do it? And it's like, I don't know. There's no
showing up and just keep going on the process and keep moving forward. And again, I want to also mention this because like people will say things like, oh, well, if you're okay with yourself and you're not trying to better yourself and you're not trying to grow, then what are you?
No, we are trying to grow. Yeah.
I am accepting of my challenges, accepting of my life, accepting of my shortcomings, accepting of like when I have setbacks, and not looking at it like I'm a big failure and I spiral out of control. It's like 2 steps back, okay, redirect, let's move forward. And it's not this big like or mental mind game I played with myself like I used to before. It's redirect. That was not my plan. That went, unexpected. Moving forward.
That's the thing is what I was going to say too is like when it's not like I thought that this would happen only one time, but it's happening more over and over. Kind of like you find yourself and you're like, wow, I love this person. And then like through progression, you find yourself again and you are constantly progressing. You do get those moments again where you have maybe a little bit of a spiral and then it gets better because through that spiral, you learned more about yourself and then you came back out of it. Kind of like, and
giving yourself
like
self-compassion and grace through all of it. That is not anything that we were taught how to do in the order. I also feel like people in the world in general aren't taught how to do that. And
to give yourself a break kind of and pat yourself on the back. That's something. So in my old diary entries, it was more like, why did you do this? Think about what you're doing. Don't make mistakes again. And I would like kind of like tally.
Your inner voice mimics the voice you were heard from your parents and the people who spoke at you growing up. And you had to take control of that inner voice and redirect it. And now your inner voice is yours.
Oh yeah, my inner voice now is so much different. Like I'll look at my diary entries even just a year ago versus now. The year ago was like shaming myself, like you can do better than this. What are you doing with your life? Now it's like, look how far you've come. Look how much you've progressed, and look what you're gonna progress even more. And I progress faster with that type of a mindset.
I think about that too, even like as a mother, like, and for myself, and like that, like if I shamed myself to be like, or like, why is it? This is where I'm going. Why is it that people think if you shame somebody that somehow you're gonna motivate and shape their behavior and be like, yeah, get to it, you horrible human being.
Yeah.
And then like. But imagine if everybody just woke up feeling like their best self with their best motivation and just feeling like, I got this and I'm going to do life today and I'm going to grow from it and we're going to accept whatever comes our way and we're going to find our way through it. And just kind of that positive self-compassion, accepting approach. And then what would they accomplish versus that person that wakes up and just like, I'm the worst person, I'm horrible, I sucked yesterday, I have a whole list of things I didn't get done and good luck today.
Yeah.
Good luck.
It's like there's going to be a world of a difference in these two different people.
Yeah.
And like how far they will go. Even though they both want the same thing, right? The two different ways of attacking those goals is going to be, it's a tremendous difference.
And that internal place and that, again, that shape of like dissecting like, oh, how did I get approached as a child and what can I do differently for my children? And who knows what? I'm going to do it all differently and my kids might grow up and be like, my mom sucked. That might happen. And if it happens, it happens.
And that's what I used to say.
I'm definitely not going to do the same thing that my mom did and hope for a different outcome.
Yeah, exactly. You're trying to do... I think what you have displayed with your kids is an example of what you wished your mom would have been doing with you.
Yes, I try to let love lead. If there's a conflict between consequence, love, let love guide my teaching and growth for them and let that shine. And if it doesn't feel like that can shine, then I need to find a new way to approach a consequent situation with them.
That's a good place to, I think, end this entire episode is like with everything, let love lead, especially with people who are asking you like, how do you process these things? How do you process, how do I get to that level of growth? If you just always set yourself back to let love guide my actions, especially towards yourself. Don't be so hard on yourself for not progressing so fast, Don't shame yourself.
Yeah, it's a hard journey for all of us, and not just from a cult and not just from a religious cult, even just being in this world. It's hard. There's a way that parenting was approached back in the day, and where all of us parents are learning new ways.
Definitely. I think that's a very good point. Just let love lead. Okay, I think I'm going to end it there.